Good morning and welcome to the Deep 404. The US government shutdown is still a possibility. Where I am is now 1st of October. There's a few hours before the Americans hit there. So where you are now, you may still be waiting for the 1st of October to see what is going to happen and if the US government shutdown will be avoided. There is a proposal out there for an extension for 45 days. As I mentioned earlier in the week, the House seemed to be trying to get through the 12 appropriation bills, which they didn't really have enough time to do, whereas the Senate were looking at an extension agreement. Now, the extension agreement for 45 days is being proposed. Republican Congressman from Oklahoma, Tom Cole, said the House of Representatives on Saturday introduced its proposal to temporarily extend government funding by 45 days, not including aid to Ukraine. He added that the proposal contains funds to combat natural disasters in the United States, things like Hawaii, I'm guessing. This is just another very strong indicator of the growing conflict in the American government on the topic of continuing to fund Ukraine. Now, I've no doubt that more funding will continue to come. However, across the board in the US and European nations, we're seeing a pivot in the way that aid is given, as we spoke about with France, the French ambassador to Ukraine travelling to Kiev this week and announcing that they are pivoting away from giving direct equipment to investment in the future creation and development of material. So moving away from giving tanks to investing in factories and licensing Ukraine to develop French tanks, that type of thing. Poland, similar thing. Poland has announced that it is not going to provide more weapons to Ukraine, but it's likely to be doing something similar in the background. Now, that's the European nations. What I want to talk about here is an article that I saw online, and this gives perhaps a different idea of what the Americans might be doing. Now, I think this is interesting, as it's very easy to say, oh, the collective West are involved in Ukraine and fighting a proxy war against Russia via Ukraine. However, what it really seems to be, more than anything else, is that the United States is driving this conflict with Russia. And it is using Ukraine primarily as the fighting force. The ground combat troops are Ukrainian men and women. However, the United States is also inflicting a toll upon Europe. Now, I've said a number of times that I feel like Russia is going to win this conflict against Ukraine. Well, I haven't actually said that I think I was going to win it. I think that if you do the numbers and you consider that Russia, being a much larger country with 140 million people compared to Ukraine's 25 million people remaining, thereabouts. But if you consider that Russia considers themselves to be in a position of existential threat, Russia believes that if they do not fight and win this battle, that Ukraine and NATO, driven by the US and primarily funded by the US, will roll into Russia and will take control of Russia. That's what Russia believes will happen if they don't win. Now, America doesn't believe that Russia will roll into the United States if Ukraine doesn't win. Even Poland and France don't believe that they are going to fall if Russia wins this conflict in Ukraine. I don't think there's really any serious people in the government and in NATO that really feel that Russia intends to keep rolling westward. It's a great narrative and a great way to get the population, the general public, to agree that, yes, we must send more weapons to Russia, or Russia will be on our doorsteps in France for croissants. That's never been the plan. I don't think anyone believes that's going to happen, even in the West, really. But the key difference here is that Russia does feel it's threatened existentially, and so it's moved to a proper war footing. And as I've said before, that is why I can't see Ukraine being able to get on top of that Russian initiative. The West has challenges with producing shells. Russia's already producing more shells and working around the clock to do that. So we have this situation where, if you look at the parties involved, Russia, Ukraine, and then the NATO European nations, all of those players are in Europe. They're side by side. The United States isn't. It's thousands of miles away. So the United States is driving, commanding, primarily funding this fight against Russia. It's using Ukrainian troops, all of the Ukrainian weaponry that was there at the start of the conflict. It's using European weapons, even some European troops. We've had plenty of reports of Polish troops fighting. We've had recent reports of Germans, a German tank crew who, if the story is correct, claimed that they weren't mercenaries. They were part of the regular German forces, but they were there to drive a tank. May or may not be a true story, but that was reported a week or so ago. So this conflict that America has got everyone into is burning through all of the European NATO nations' military hardware and ammunition supplies. So this article that I want to talk about, I'm going to read parts of it and then talk a bit about it. It appears, I found it on a Telegram channel, and it appears to have been written by someone called Sergey Slesserenko. Now, so I'm attributing the parts that I'll read, to Sergey Slesserenko. And it was titled, "The US Won't Get Tired of Ukraine." This is the title that caught my eye, because I know that we've talked a lot about how the US is going to stop its funding and how it's going to get out of the war because it can't win. That's that kind of thing. But maybe the US has got a different angle on this, and this is what this article talks about, and I thought it was interesting. So it starts off with the narrative. The USA is tired of the northern Black Sea region. When he says northern Black Sea region here, he's referring to Ukraine, and will soon stop the flow of aid. And citizen Zelensky will be forced to go to the Korean scenario. Now, the Korean scenario is where talk at the moment is that the Ukrainians negotiate with Russia, Russia agree, and they cease the fighting where the lines are now, and they draw up some sort of an agreement. Now, it won't be a real end to the war. It'd be some sort of negotiated peace agreement where those lines would remain and Ukraine doesn't get destroyed anymore by the Russian juggernaut rolling westwards. And for some reason, Russia decides that they're happy with that. Why that would happen, I don't know. But that's the Korean scenario. In this narrative that is being massively disseminated today in a number of Western media, somewhere they do this with mere hints, somewhere they say it directly. But these conclusions are purely fantasies based on nothing, no matter how much people in Russia may like to believe them. He then goes on to say, "The world is material, and all the actions of certain geopolitical forces are always dictated only and exclusively by material benefits and arrangements. Now, this point here harks back to John Mearsheimer's logic. And I hope that I'm not misquoting John Mearsheimer here. And certainly he doesn't say these exact words. But he says that geopolitics, what we see there is the interplay between states and, a power interplay between states, where states have limited information about one another, so they have to make assumptions on that. And those assumptions lead them to make choices where they will aim to protect the security of their nation. So here this Sergey Slesserenko is hinting at a similar way of thinking here. It's a material world. The decisions made here are based upon material benefits. So what the US is doing here is based upon material benefits for the US. It isn't based upon, making Ukraine democratic. That might be a byproduct of them achieving the material benefits that they want. He goes on, these calculations are such that it is profitable for America to support the Ukrainian region at the moment, which is not shyly stated by the American political class. For example, Senator Lindsey Graham, who argues that this is the best money we've ever spent, which he's referring to Senator Lindsey Graham's comment that the money they're spending killing Russians is the best money the Americans have ever spent, when he was questioned on, is America fighting a proxy war in the Ukraine? And Slesserenko goes on to say, and Graham's not lying. The US has indeed finally found the assembly point to which they are applying the lever to restart the US industry. And this is the key point that this article really goes on to talk about, and how it is doing this. I found this to be a very insightful, very interesting article. I think some of the things in here are correct. And again, maybe hidden. We hear a lot about the problems that the US has at the moment with the de-dollarization going on, with the formation of BRICS and that type of thing, and that is a challenge for the US. But hidden in the background, there may be some material benefits, and I think this article calls them out, and that's why I wanted to read this through today. He says, yes, that the US has indeed found the assembly point to which they are applying the lever to restart the US industry, the industry which has been weakened and lost its competitive edge over other global manufacturers. So why should they, having found that fulcrum, voluntarily give it up? And then he says, let's take a step back from the various Reuters articles and consider what the US has gotten. The US economy, which has reached a dead end and has gone sideways, if not to stagnation, has received an excellent chance to carry out a new round of industrialization by forcing out of the market one of its main competitors, European industry. So here he's talking about how, as an example, Germany has been removed as a competitor to the United States by the deindustrialization that's occurring to Germany. So through the US's export and support of green policies and green initiatives, which the Germans have picked up on, and through the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline and this conflict in Ukraine, the sanctions which have stopped direct purchase of Russian gas and oil by Germany and have led to Germany having to buy it through intermediaries at inflated prices, the US has effectively nobbled one of its main competitors. Now, you might say, well, they wouldn't do that because Germany is an ally. And yes. But remember, the whole premise of this article and the driving concept, the vein that runs through this story that he's telling, is that beyond those allies is a desire for America to treat America as number one and to find material benefits for America. So one of the things that he's suggesting America has gained is that the US economy, which has gone sideways, has received an excellent chance to carry out a new round of industrialization by forcing out of the market one of its main competitors, the European industry. He goes on, in addition to eliminating European industry, the US broke some of the logistical links in the global production chain and switched them to itself. So this is not just about Russian hydrocarbons, but also, for example, about Chinese logistic initiatives. For example, the one which Italy is withdrawing itself from, or talking about doing that, which is the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, which is a large land, belt and sea road, oddly enough, initiative of investment around the world to establish global trading routes. So the US has been able to break some of the logistical links in the global production chain and switch them to itself. So, as an example, US liquid natural gas couldn't compete in Europe with Russian natural gas. But now, after the EU sanctions and the Ukrainian conflict and the Nord Stream pipeline destruction, US liquid natural gas can now compete with Russian natural gas. And he goes on to say that in a similar way, the US has made some of its goods competitive with Chinese corporations. These disruptions of the global production are designed to provide US manufacturers with new markets or to win back lost markets and avoiding direct price competition with more successful opponents. So the gas one is a great example there. Losing the European gas market or unable to compete in the European gas market against Russia, this conflict has enabled the US to now be able to compete in the European gas market against Russia. He moves on to a third point, and this is a talk about hyperinflation, helicopter money. So the US has handed out money to support their own population and businesses to keep them alive, and this has led to an increase in inflation expectations. This, combined with the wave of declining demand from the dollar from world trade, so the de-dollarization, especially through world commodity markets, this has kept the inflation within America, and this risks it becoming hyperinflation. So, what has the United States done to combat this? Thanks to the Ukrainian conflict, they've concentrated $1 trillion into the real sector of the economy, into military orders at their American enterprises. And this trillion is just the beginning. Now, you'll note I've said, I agree with this point here, because I've also said the counterpoint as being one of the reasons why I think that Russia is going to continue to grind westwards. Russia has moved to a war footing. And what has that done? Russia has invested domestically. So Russia has, in this conflict, has been forced to achieve the same outcomes that America is driving for. Sanctions against Russia meant that Russia had to break its supply chains with other nations and had to invest and begin to produce domestically. And it does. We've had reports of Russian investment and production of facilities to create processor chips for computers and that sort of thing, which previously they were purchasing from overseas. Now they're no longer importing them. They're producing them at home. Russia has a labour shortage because everybody's working at the moment producing ammunition and tanks and shells and supporting the war effort. What this article, what Slesserenko is saying here, is that America recognised it needs to do the same, and it has now effectively done that. This aid, all of these tens and hundreds of billions of dollars that the US is signing and saying it's for Ukraine. As I've said, many of these things are contracts. They're not tanks sent to Ukraine yet. They are contracts to develop tanks. And what they will be is contracts to develop tanks, and those tanks will then be the newer versions Those tanks will fill the American supplies. The older American tanks will then be sent to Ukraine or sold to Ukraine, or they will be sold to someone else. But this money for Ukraine, much of it has just turned around and stayed within America and gone into the military industrial complex in America to revive it. So America stepping away from China, money now going to bring jobs back to America to build the shells, the tanks, the missiles that are going to be needed to continue the conflict in Ukraine against Russia, and when perhaps that does slow down or even draw to an end, to build stockpiles to then be able to go on and take on China. And he goes on to say that Europe is successfully utilising its old stocks of military equipment under pressure from the United States. As we've been saying here, Poland said, hey, we've had enough. We've given away too much. France has said the same thing. We're not giving away any more of our stuff. We're giving away too much kit. We need to keep some for ourselves so we can defend ourselves. So Europe is successfully utilising old stocks of the military equipment under pressure of the United States. Soon it will be necessary to restore the stockpiles. And then American defence manufacturers will appear on the scene again. And then European defence budgets will flow. Now, this all to me makes complete sense. Yes, there are challenges. And he goes on to cover off that there are big internal problems in the US. But again, some of those have hidden benefits. There is the problem in the US at the moment of the open southern border and the migrant crisis there. I saw a great illustrative picture of this yesterday on Twitter, where it said, you as an American citizen at the airport, there's a man standing there with a TSA, an airport security, transport security guy, with his hands wrapped around his upper thigh between his legs, frisking him, feeling him down, quite personally. And then there was a picture of a migrant coming across the border, fist bumping one of the American Border Patrol people there. It's an illustration, but it gives you the idea. There is a migrant crisis in the US. There's a migrant crisis in Europe at the moment. I'm not saying that aid shouldn't be given to people. I'm just saying that at the moment there is a crisis because there are completely open borders, which means there is no control about the influx. Now, allowing migration into your country is something you should do. There are very strong, clear benefits from doing that. But it should be in a managed way, is my feeling. It's like, you have a party at your house. You invite people in, you let people in. Other people turn up you weren't expecting. Sure, they know someone. You think they're a nice person. They'll come in. They'll be good fun for the party. You let them in. You just open the doors wide. Go on Facebook and say, "There's a party at this house tomorrow. Everyone go for it." You're just going to destroy your house. Anyhow, so he goes on to say there are big problems in the US. One of them being the migrant crisis. However, the flip side of that, migrants will become a cheap labour force at defence companies, and they will learn to assemble artillery shells quickly. So again, these things which are happening, there may be some benefit behind them, some reasoning behind them. All of those people coming into America are not all going to get welfare checks. They're going to need to find work to pay for their families. And if there are jobs working in military factories, people will pick up those jobs. And we do know that in many cases, people travelling to a nation to work will be prepared to work for lower wages than the native inhabitants of that nation. Broad statement, but often, I think, in the West, often demonstrated to be true. So yeah, this article I found to be very interesting because I think it highlights perhaps what might really be going on with the US, what their thinking might really be. Why the US has been last. So they're the biggest funder, they're driving this. yet they've been last to get into the fight with tanks. And we haven't seen their F-16s arrive yet. And on the topic of F-16s, just a note on that. Pentagon Press Secretary Sabrina Singh revealed that the Ukrainian pilots are the training is starting for the F-16 training, and it is starting with English lessons. English training has started for several pilots. She didn't have specific numbers on this, and that the English language training will vary depending on the level of knowledge and skills. Now, this does make sense, that English training lessons would be starting. All of the documentation for the F-16s will be written in English, no doubt. However, one wonders if there hasn't been some translation done to Ukraine already. One would have thought the Americans might have seen this coming at some point. Also, you would think there would be Ukrainian and English interpreters who would help this, so that their training would actually be not perhaps being slowed down just by the need to learn English. But anyhow, might be reading more into it than we see. But we're not getting reports that, hey, look at this, here's some Ukrainian pilots dogfighting in F-16s already. So what I'm getting at here is that the F-16s are going slowly. The Abrams are going slowly. The Abrams that are turning up are very old. And again, this is, I believe, a point which plays into this idea we're talking about, Slesserenko is talking about here, is that the US don't want their kit, their stock price going down. They want people to keep buying F-16s and keep buying Abrams. So if we now manage to get to, say, the winter, the Rapotista, where the rains will come for a little while, there'll be a slowing down. We're going to see that when I get to the battle report, a bit of a slowing down there in the numbers. And then to the winter, and the Ukrainians go on the defensive, and the Abrams that are sent there get pulled to the back, and the F-16s don't make it because the weather conditions are no good for a few more months. Then this just gives more time for the Americans to be able to run this gig of getting everyone else to give their kit away. So they need to restock their coffers. Those contracts will come back to the Americans, and everyone thinks the F-16s and the Abrams are still good, so they'll buy them because they haven't been demonstrated to not be suitable for the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, which is what many people expect will actually happen when the F-16s and the Abrams get there. The Abrams will burn just like any of the other tanks will burn. They haven't fought in these conditions with these minefields and with drones in the past. The F-16s will suffer against the S-400 air defense systems just like everything else does. Anyhow, so an interesting article there. I'll post some of it into the description of this video if there's enough space there. Okay, getting into the battle update then for the day. Just a couple of points, just a couple of notes that I'll talk about before we get right into the map. New tank ammo for the Russians. Commander-in-Chief of the Ground Forces, Oleg Salyukov, reported on the pages of Krasnaya Zvezda that new Telnik shells have begun to be used in T-90M tanks. The 30F-82 Telnik tank fragmentation beam projectile is ammunition which is capable of being detonated at a required approach point before the target, and you can choose the direction of expansion of the explosive component. It can explode forward in a cone or in a circular field. He goes on to say that such shells make it very effective to hit infantry entrenched in trenches or lying in fields, which is extremely difficult to reach with a direct hit from a classic tank shell. I imagine that also these fragmentation shells, the thing with hitting tanks is they're softest on the top. They've got a lot of armour at the front for the face-to-face battles. They've got quite a lot of armour on the sides so they don't get flanked. Not so much armour on the back, because if they're showing their tail, then they're trying to run away. Some of them move relatively quickly now, and they hope to get out of the way. The tops, really, they've never really thought about them that much. Now, that's changing, of course, and that's changing because of weapons like this. These are shells which can be fired at a tank. They don't need to strike the tank. They will detonate above the tank. As they fly directly over the tank, they detonate above, and a shaped charge will then rip down and hit the soft top of the tank. So that's what these things. So these are now coming into play for the T-90s. Fighting continues with drone strikes. So the Ukraine Vinnytsia airfield, 15 to 20 drones apparently last night, perhaps in 2 waves, attacked the airfield. And then reports are that there may have been missiles that also came into the Vinnytsia airfield, and that air defense did not respond to those missiles. It didn't say what type of missiles they were, what damage was done. But this is an attack on a Ukrainian airfield. There was also an attack on a Russian town of Polgar in the Bryansk area. A drone there, apparently 1 or 2 drones dropped munitions onto an electrical substation and caused localized outages. So here we can see the Ukrainians targeting a Russian civilian substation. I think we're going to see and hear a lot about substations being targeted over the next couple of weeks as we move into the Northern Hemisphere winter. However, there's also reports, though, that China, comes from the United Kingdom Royal United Research Institute for Defence and Security, that Chinese drone manufacturers are reducing exports to Ukraine of drones. This export reduction has started September the 1st. Reportedly, Ukraine is losing 10,000 drones per month. That's clearly the FPV smaller drones, not the larger ones, but 10,000 a month. The article from the Royal United Research Institute doesn't say if the Chinese export is impacting Russian drones that Russia may be purchasing from China, but it does say that it is impacting Ukraine. All right, to the battlefront. Let's just get our map here so that you can see it. Okay, starting up in the north, the Kupiansk area. This is the Russian Ministry of Defense reporting. As I've said many times, this reporting I use it because it's consistently delivered to us. Every day it's provided. While the numbers given for lost equipment and lost servicemen may not be exactly entirely accurate, I can't tell. I'm not there on the ground. We do at least be able to see things like trends here, which give us an indication of what's happening overall on the battlefront. We can start to read into that. And as I said before, take this with the amount of skepticism that you feel is warranted, but there are cases where we have had reports by the Ministry of Defence, and you can then go and find the video that they're reporting on to verify it. Anyhow, in the Kupiansk direction, units of the Zapad group of forces, in the course of active operations supported by Army aviation and artillery, have inflicted a fire defeat on Ukraine close to Stepovaya and Novosilovka in the Kharkov region. The enemy losses were up to 20 Ukrainian servicemen and 2 motor vehicles. In addition, 1 US-manufactured M777 artillery system, 1 M-Star-B gun, and 1 Gvozdika self-propelled artillery system were destroyed. So this is in the Kupiansk region along here, coming down here. And as we move down to the bottom end of this red line, we get down to the Liman area, and here's Torsky. And this area here, Krasny Liman direction. As a result of coordinated actions by units of the Centre group of forces, Army aviation and artillery, 2 attacks by assault groups of the 21st and 67th Mechanised Brigades of the AFU. The AFU is an abbreviation for the Armed Forces of Ukraine, have been repelled close to Yampolovka and Chervonaya Dibrova. This is Chernovaya Dibrova. He's just here, this orange dot on the map. Just Torsky. I can zoom in a little bit there for you, around the forested area here. The enemy losses in the Krasny Liman direction were up to 50 Ukrainian servicemen, 2 armoured fighting vehicles, 3 motor vehicles, and 1 D-30 howitzer. Just remember again that the numbers for lost servicemen, Ukrainian lost servicemen, that the Russian Ministry of Defence reports upon, they have reported in the past that they obtained these numbers through broken interceptions of Ukrainian reports being sent up their chain of command. It's not through just visual confirmation or estimates on the ground. It's through the Ukrainian reported losses. Again, I can't confirm that that is true, but that's what the Ministry of Defence has said is the mechanism by which they obtain this information. Okay, Krasny-Liman. So Krasny-Liman and Kupiansk, 70 reported men lost across that line in the last 24 hours, sort of along that red line there. That seems to be really just a stabilisation of the line there. There doesn't seem to be a great deal of activity going on. Even in the reporting, there was only a couple of attacks that reported as being repelled there. So the Ukrainians just holding the line there, the Russians not forcing the line, it seems, at the moment. Now, moving to Donetsk. So our Donetsk region is this here, where we have Donetsk city down here at the bottom where this yellow line begins, and Bakhmut up here where we can see this collection of dots up around here. This is Bakhmut, the orange one there. In Donetsk direction, units of the Yug group of forces, in cooperation with aviation and artillery, have successfully repelled 7 attacks by AFU units close to Kleshchevka, Mariinka, Vodyanoye and Khmelnyk in the Donetsk People's Republic. Kleshchevka remains under Russian fire control. The Ministry of Defence released a video today reported to showing this. I've got no reason to disbelieve that this short video was actually of Kleshchevka. There's ample video of these areas. But it was showing Russian artillery working on Ukrainian servicemen in trenches in that area. Kleshchevka is here, is just south of Bakhmut. It is this small area of houses here. It's less than a township, really. It is being fought after as it provides access to this rail line which runs up to the south of Bakhmut. And the Ukrainians would desperately like to get control back of Bakhmut. And so by taking Kleshchevka, they get this rail line which is elevated. This is also why in Andriivka, in this area here, there's been a lot of talk about Andriivka having been claimed by the Ukrainians of late, because that rail line extends down past Andriivka. And there is, at least at Andriivka, there may be at Kleshchevka as well, but at Andriivka, there are those underground facilities, which you can just see on this map here. You can see the mouth on either side of the rail line to them, which provides some, quite strong defence for the Russian forces in this area, being able to retreat underground when the Ukrainians attack them. Okay, in addition, enemy manpower and military hardware concentrations have been eliminated near Bogdanovka and Kurdiumovka in the Donetsk People's Republic. The enemy losses were up to 430 Ukrainian servicemen killed and wounded. Now, so this is really fighting around Bakhmut to the west of Bakhmut, around here, and getting down to Donetsk itself, Mariinka down here, and Avdiivka. Avdiivka, there's also heavy losses being suffered by the Ukrainians in this area here, because they are in this salient. They've been in this pocket-shaped area for months now. So 430. Yeah, heavy fighting. The Donetsk area, Bakhmut area, has been one of the 2 heavy areas, really, of fighting over the offensive. The other one is, which we'll get to in a moment, is this green area. This is in Zaporozhye and Robotny and Verbova. But before we get there, we'll just finish off the reporting for the Donetsk region. During counter-battery warfare, 1 US-manufactured M777 artillery system, 1 Polish-manufactured Krab self-propelled artillery system, and 1 Gwozdzik self-propelled artillery system were destroyed in fighting. In South Donetsk direction, South Donetsk is this yellow area across here, and the focus area around here is around Urozhaine and Priutny, this area here. This is Veremke Ledge. The Ukrainians have come down this ledge through Storozhev, through Blarhotne, Makarivka, Staromayorsk, Urozhaine, and are now looking to widen and put pressure on Priutny over here. In South Donetsk direction, units of the Vostok group of forces, in cooperation with Army Aviation and Artillery, have inflicted a fire defeat on AFU assault detachments close to Nikolskoye and repelled 2 attacks by the 127th and 128th Territorial Defence Brigades near Rovnopol and Priutny. Now we just move ourselves down to Zaporozhye. So here we have Orkiv here, this top dot. Orkiv here. Mala Tokmacha. Robotne is here. Verbove is here. It's about 12 kilometers across from Robotne to Verbove. It's not far here. And then if we, the goal here for the Ukrainians is to get down past Robotne and Verbove, then get down to Tokmak, which is here. Tokmak a little further. From the outskirts of Tokmak to outskirts of Robotne, 18 kilometers. A little further if you want to get to the center. Okay. In the Zaporozhye region, units of the Russian forces using aviation and artillery have inflicted a fire defeat on enemy near Verbove, which we just spoke. This is Verbove here. The enemy losses were over 30 Ukrainian servicemen, 2 armoured fighting vehicles and 3 motor vehicles. In addition, in the course of counter-battery warfare, 1 US-manufactured M119 towed howitzer, 1 UK-manufactured FH-70 artillery system, as well as 2 D-30 and 1 M-Star-B howitzers have been destroyed. Again, we're seeing a slowdown in the level of activity in this area here, and I'll get to why in just a moment, or at least why I think it might be. 2 reasons. One, there have been reports of an amassing of forces around the Orkiv region here. But secondly, there have been reports of the preparation for a southern attack. Going further south from here, we'll get there on the map in just a moment. But so from Zaporozhye, Kherson, and down to Mykolaiv in just the northern Odessa region, along there are reports from Russian sources that they are seeing an amassing of Ukrainian troops along that area, and they're expecting some sort of an attack in early October. We'll just move our map just through some of these areas. So remember this here, this green dot here, well, this water source here, this is the Dnipro River. This is Zaporozhye city at the top. This is the Dnipro River flows down to Kherson. This is the Novokhovka Reservoir, this area here. This is the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant right here on the reservoir. Now the reservoir, the dam, the Novokhovka dam, which is down here, if you recall, was destroyed a few months ago across here, and that allowed this reservoir to drain. So this area from north of Kherson here all the way up to Zaporozhye here was effectively a water barrier. It's a couple of kilometers across in some stretches here. This is now drained to be a river. So the bulk of the water is gone. I saw a month or so ago photos of crops now being grown on the flood wetlands here. I don't know the state of the reservoir basin, if it's now had enough time over the summer to dry up to be able to support heavy equipment, but we may find out as these talks are that from the Zaporozhye region down to Kherson here and even to Mykolaiv, there is an amassing of forces, with talks that there may be attempt to breach here at this area here, which is, I do know the name of it, the Kinburn Spit. This area of land just here is known as the Kinburn Spit. And you can see that it is only from here to here, 3.8 kilometres. So with some amphibious landing craft at a low tide, I guess you would get in there relatively easily. Perhaps you'd like a high tide to get over onto this more firm ground. I'm not sure. I'm not an amphibious landing expert. But regardless, you can see how that allows you to build forces up here in Mykolaiv, shoot down the river, scoot over here, and then get onto some land, perhaps then shoot across this spit and get yourself down here in an attempt to get behind Russian forces which are defending the access to Kherson. So here's Kherson here, the Antonovsky Bridge, Kazachi Lahiri we've spoken about before. In the Kherson region, the Ministry of Defense reporting is that the enemy losses were up to 40 Ukrainian servicemen as well as 3 motor vehicles. We've seen over the last week or so reports of a number of Ukrainian reconnaissance groups through these island areas being detected. So it does feel as though there is some build-up happening along this southern line, and that Ukraine may be looking to, as I say, get people to push in, to get down here in behind, somehow cut these bridges, the Henishevsk Bridge, perhaps the Chongar Bridge, and then launch Storm Shadow missiles against the Kerch Bridge down here, in an attempt to take some control over Crimea. A push down through here, perhaps abandon the idea of getting to Tokmak and instead just get down and try and hold some sort of a line across here. Very difficult to hold because you've got Russian forces on both sides. However, if you've cut the Kerch Strait, you then make it more difficult for the Russians to reinforce. Nevertheless, still tough to try and hold something like this. Tough to hold something across here too, from the Zaporozhye, Novokhovka reservoir down to Tokmak and to Melitopol, but that was the plan. That's about it for today, for the report. Look, I hope you're enjoying these reports. I'm enjoying doing them. I hope you are having a good weekend. And if you haven't already subscribed and you've enjoyed the channel, please subscribe. I'm going to be starting putting content up on Twitter as well. So these videos will become available on Twitter, and I'll get an opportunity there to comment a little more frequently on things as they happen during the day. So if you are on Twitter, please go and have a look for the Deep 404 on Twitter and follow me there. There's no content there as of yet, really, but that will be starting. So yeah, have a good weekend. I look forward to talking to you again soon.